all kinds of spectacular and interesting ways, which I'm sure she will tell you about in better ways than I can. So yeah, we're going to hear about condoms, justice, and tweets, an intro into reproductive justice and how to take action. Please welcome Allie.
This is URGE's first SSA conference. I'm sure it will not be our last, so thank you all for having us. So earlier we had a panel about reproductive justice, but I want to dig a little bit deeper into what exactly that means and unpack some of the buzzwords around reproductive justice. So some of the goals for this presentation are, what do we actually mean when we say reproductive justice? It isn't just a term to talk about the movement, but it's actually a really specific framework. Understanding intersectionality is a tool for inclusive and social justice work, and really broadening our analysis around reproductive health, rights, and justice issues. Can I get a show of hands of folks who have heard this term reproductive justice before this conference? Cool. Does anyone give an example of what they think about when they hear reproductive justice? You can just shout them out.
Access.
Great. I see hands back there? Other buzzwords?
Access.
Cool. Those are all very great examples of what reproductive justice are. So the definition that URGE has is when all people have the economic, social, political power and resources to make healthy decisions about their bodies, sexuality, and reproduction for themselves, their families, and their communities in all areas of their lives. So there's a lot there. Economic, social, and political power. So we're going to do a little bit of exercise to break down what access really looks like and what a justice analysis incorporates. So if everyone who is able to could stand up for me. Does anyone know what happened in 1973?
Yes.
There we go. Roe v. Wade was a Supreme Court decision that legalized abortion in all 50 states. I think someone's blocking that. Oh, not a big deal. So, right now, it is 1973. I'm going to make you sit down in a minute anyways. It is 1973, and abortion is legal in all 50 states. So, could I have everyone in these first three rows sit down? So you all are impacted by the Hyde Amendment. Does anyone know what the Hyde Amendment is?
Keeps abortion from Medicaid.
Yeah, exactly. So the Hyde Amendment blocks federal insurance from covering abortion care, which means that if you're in the military, if you're a Peace Corps volunteer, if you work for the federal government, and the biggest impact being that if you're on Medicaid, you cannot have your abortion covered by your insurance. And abortion can be really expensive sometimes. It usually starts around $400, can go up to thousands of dollars depending on the circumstances. So, and most people don't have the money for that out of nowhere. So because of that, you all do not have access to abortion. So I'm going to have everyone on this section sit down. So you all are under 18. In 38 states right now, there's some sort of parental notification or parental consent law saying that people under 18 cannot access abortion without talking to their parents. In some ways, it might make sense to you because it's under the guise of, well, we need to protect children, we need to make sure that they're getting the proper care that they need. But really, this puts vulnerable young people more at risk, especially if they're being abused. And the reality is that most young people do tell their parents if they need an abortion unless they're in an abusive situation. Not to mention, it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense, right? I mean, if you're under 18 and you're not capable of making a decision about your body, but you're expected to raise children, just not a great logic there. So because of that, you all do not have access to abortion. So this is a big one. I'm going to have everyone in the front section here sit down. So all of you right now live in the 89%, at least, 89% of the counties that do not have an abortion provider. Does anyone know what a trap law is? Someone
It targets abortion providers?
Yeah, they're targeted regulations against abortion providers. So these are laws and regulations that put in rules that really are not necessary in order to make abortion care safer, when really it's not necessary because abortion is one of the safest procedures in the world, safer than getting your wisdom teeth taken out. So the purpose of these laws is really to shut down abortion providers and make sure that they cannot stay open. In Ohio, we've gone from 16 abortion clinics to 8 abortion clinics in less than 5 years. That's huge. We have major metropolitan areas here that are at risk for no longer having an abortion provider. So because of that, all of you had to sit down. So I'm going to have the back section over here sit down. All of you were made to go through a mandatory counseling session or a waiting period. So mandatory counseling sessions force your doctor to lie about your procedure, saying that it causes breast cancer, mental health issues, something else that's been does not have scientific support towards it. Yeah, do you have a question?
I just have a thing to add. Doesn't these waiting periods often force people who travel from far away to get an abortion have to either stay in a hotel or something like that, and then or come back again?
Yeah, definitely. That was what I was going to get to next. The waiting periods are 24 hours or more. In South Dakota and other states, there's 72 hours, not including weekends or holidays. I mean, it basically says, oh, you can't think over 4th of July weekend about your abortion. Not to mention, these laws are hugely misogynist. It's like saying, oh, you haven't thought enough about your procedure. You better wait longer in order to really think about it, mandated by the law. And like you said, this often forces people who drive hours for their procedure to get hotel rooms, to find childcare. They have to take off multiple days of work. And that really, really impacts access. So because of that, all of you have to sit down because you cannot access abortion. So let's take a look at all the people sitting down and standing up. A lot of people, and this is a kind of a rough guesstimate of access here. I usually do it in like a room of 20. Everyone can sit down. But I want us to know how access impacts us. And really, while Roe v. Wade made abortion legal, it's really not accessible to a huge portion of the population. And so when we're talking about the right to choose, it's not really about choice because there's no point in having a choice if you can't access it, which I realized I didn't go through my PowerPoint, so I talked too much, but you all got the gist, right? So what we want to go is thinking about choice to justice. So choice is really a response to taking away rights, while justice is a response to oppression. Justice recognizes that our choices are impacted by oppression and by our identities, and that choice really isn't a huge option for us, for a lot of us. And the Hyde Amendment is a great example of that, because the Hyde Amendment was based on oppression. It was based on racist and classist ideas of abortion access. And Henry Hyde himself, who created the law, said, I can't prevent all women from accessing abortion, but I can prevent certain women from that, and so that's the important thing. This is a very dramatic PowerPoint. So that's why the reproductive justice framework really provides a way to think about the advocacy, organizing, and trainings that we do. And the history of reproductive justice really shows this. So this was my trivia question for the last panel. In the 1994 UN meeting, International Conference on Population and Development was held in Cairo in 1994. And there was a lot of rhetoric around population control, which is really just really racist and really targeting women of color in the global south. And so a group of black women and academics and activists came together and came up with this term reproductive justice to show the ways that their oppression is, the way that oppression impacts them outside of this traditional reproductive rights framework that focuses so heavily on preventing and terminating pregnancy. It doesn't always recognize the fact that some folks want to have children, but they really can't make that choice because of the world we create for their children. So, reproductive justice it's exactly the type of framework that kind of expands beyond abortion access. So also, forced sterilization is a huge issue in this country today. People with disabilities, women in prison, in 2013, almost 250 women were forcibly sterilized. LGBTQ couples still have issues adopting. Trans folks are still not a huge part of the conversation around pregnancy in the mainstream reproductive rights movement. So that's why reproductive justice is really about centering marginalized voices to make sure those conversations are had. Young people, LGBTQ folks, people of color. So we also want to get into the definition of reproductive oppression, which involves governments, institutions, and individuals exploiting and controlling all people's bodies, sexualities, and reproduction to perpetuate systems of oppression. And we take this frame because we really believe this issue impacts everyone. And that's why we're a youth-led organization, because we believe that young people should really lead the way to our activism and organizing. So next I'm going to talk a little bit about oppression and intersectionality. Who has heard these terms, intersectionality, before? It's been huge all throughout this conference, right? And so I'm going to go through this a little bit faster since I know this has been talked about a lot. Urge's definition of intersectionality refers to the ways in which oppressive systems, racism, classism, and sexism intersect and how they affect the ways each individual experiences the world. And so, really intersectionality, it seems like a buzzword, right? Like some weird, word we hear in women's studies that doesn't mean anything, but it actually impacts our day-to-day lives all the time. And it's like a giant cycle, right? Governments create policies and institutions. Institutions create, education, the military, create policies that impact us, that impact the way that we think about the world. And it's like a giant cycle, right? So intersectionality really shows the way that our privileges and oppressions impact the way we experience our day-to-day life. And really the word intersectionality was developed by Black women in academia to describe their experiences. And so oftentimes women's rights movements focus on white women's experiences. But racial justice movements often show men's experiences. And so Black women were often at the intersection here and their experiences weren't discussed. So academics like Patricia Hill Collins came up with this word to describe her experiences.
Kim Crenshaw. Kim Crenshaw coined the word.
Thank you.
Law professor.
So next I want to go over a little bit about the difference between the reproductive rights, health, and justice movements. The reproductive health movement really provides a direct service. So these are your Planned Parenthoods, your local abortion clinic. Your reproductive rights movements are really the organizations that do work around advocacy and policy. So these are your NARAL, Center for Reproductive Rights. Reproductive justice really does the capacity building, community organizing, and analysis to take the issues deeper. And so these are organizations like Urge and Sister Song, which is a Black women's organization based in Georgia. The National Latina Institute for Reproductive Health, doing capacity building in order to bring new folks into the movement and doing direct action. And so I really want to talk about this because what I'd really love for you to take away is to not conflate reproductive rights, health, and justice as one big movement, but reproductive justice as its own analysis. And so I have a couple of examples here. So abortion. So abortion in the reproductive health world would be a procedure to terminate a pregnancy. Reproductive rights would be the legalization of abortion and fighting restrictions placed on abortion services. Reproductive justice would be organizing to address social, economic, and political barriers to abortion access. And so I also have the same example for condoms and emergency contraception. And I don't really like to think these are a hierarchy at all, but they're just different frameworks to think about different issues. And that reproductive justice is really about intersectionality and understanding how oppression plays into these issues. And you can see, well, and then it says a movement. I did not make this PowerPoint. Use this actually really corny. So you need all three in order to have a whole movement. So I want to take the last 10 minutes or so to talk about some ways to take action around reproductive justice. So if everyone can take out their phone, if you have one. Text the word URGE to 52886. What this will do is give you a link to contact your representatives about the Real Education for Healthy Youth Act. This is a federal piece of legislation that URGE has been working on. It was recently reintroduced, so we're really trying to get folks to reach out to their members of Congress in order to get it moving. This piece of legislation impacts the funding of comprehensive sex education services. What it would do is defund abstinence-only programs in public schools and fund inclusive, comprehensive programs. And so when you do this, it takes 30 seconds. It'll send you a link. You fill out your info, press the send button, and then it sends a notification to your member of Congress. And just a little action like this can actually make a huge impact when we're doing organizing. A lot of our members of Congress hear from their anti-choice constituents like 3 to 10 times more than their pro-choice constituents. And so it's super important that we continue to take action like this. And even though it may seem like they're indifferent or that they're not listening, it actually makes a huge impact when we continue to do this and let them know what their constituents think. And a lot of members of Congress don't hear from their young constituents, and so it's important for them to know where you're coming from. I know one member of Congress from Ohio, Tim Ryan, actually changed his view on abortion access a few years ago because of the personal stories that he was hearing, which was a pretty amazing transformation. In order to get involved with URGE, you can also join an URGE chapter. We're currently active in 6 states: Ohio, Kansas, Texas, California, Georgia, and Alabama. We focus in these particular states in order to give a lot of investment and resources. We also have a couple other programs you can get involved in. You can take action online on our website. You can apply to one of our paid internships in our Washington, D.C. office. These internships are really a great way to get involved in the movement, network, to learn about what it's like to organize and do trainings. And they're every fall, spring, and summer, and you can apply online. We also have a student journalist program where you can apply to blog about reproductive justice issues and have some of your work published. And that opens up every spring. Cool, so I'm gonna go ahead and open the floor to take questions. We have around 5-ish minutes. Yeah.
I have a question for the definitions that can you actually go back to?
Yeah.
For the reproductive justice for emergency contraception. Yeah, they're available for all, but would that be like how Plan B is said to only work for like women under a certain weight and like over it, it's pretty much just obsolete?
Yeah, definitely. I also just realized I haven't been using the microphone. I guess I'm just really loud. Sorry about that. So, yeah, no, you're right. So the question was, does this bottom line which says that is emergency contraception for all bodies referring to the weight limits on Plan B? So Plan B a few years ago came out as saying it wouldn't work for folks over, I believe, 170. And so a conversation needs to be had around who can access over-the-counter medication, especially since Plan B has a particular deal worked out with the FDA to make it more widely available than generic versions. So thank you for pointing that out. I wanted to roll through it, but I'm glad you pointed out that particular thing because it's not really talked about a whole lot. Yeah.
I just wanted to add there is another medication like Plan B that is available, or it works on women of a higher weight range, but there's still a cap. I can't remember the name of it. There is another version, but it's still not great.
There's Ella, and then I also saw another generic recently called Take Action, which I don't know how they come up with these names. Yeah, there's a couple of varieties of emergency contraception that fortunately work for folks of weight ranges beyond 170. So thank you for pointing that out too. It's not all hope is not lost for emergency contraception. Do we have other questions?